begin.
All right.
So first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out and joining us tonight, and those of you who are viewing us over the internet, thank you also for joining. We are here, Hodinkee and of course Omega, to celebrate 60 years of probably the single most remarkable wristwatch in the history of wristwatches, a watch with an unparalleled history, the Omega Speedmaster. And we're here tonight with Mr. Petros Protopapas, who is the Heritage Director for Omega, and who has one of the most phenomenal memories that I've ever encountered in my life. I think he has not forgotten a single thing he's ever heard about the Speedmaster, or for that matter, anything else. So, in 6 decades, the Speedmaster has accumulated an absolutely phenomenal history. We all know its history of use in manned spaceflight and elsewhere. And tonight, since we have to focus on just a few things, because the whole story is far too big to tell in one evening or even days, Petros has been kind enough to bring 3 watches that represent some really truly fascinating aspects of the history of the Speedmaster. And we're going to jump right in with the first one, which is the reference 2998. And I'd like to ask you, Petros, so with so many possible choices to make, and with all of the resources of the Omega Museum and Omega's history, and the Speedmaster's history, why this particular reference? Why was it one of the 3?
Quite easy, thank you, Jack. The 2998 was the model that transitioned the Speedmaster from the classic, legendary 2915, which was a racing car driver's favorite. It transitioned it into something completely different. It transitioned it into a pilot's favorite, into a doctor's favorite, and obviously also into something that almost went out of this world. Right. The 2998 became a pilot's favorite, or a military pilot's favorite at first, because of the simple fact that the very first deliveries of Air Force.
Oh.
And this has...
sorry, the very first series of 2998, the very first, they
yes,
were delivered to the Peruvian
exactly.
Air Force. So it actually was a pilot's watch.
If you want to call... to a pilot, this watch is a perfect pilot's watch. Black dial, contrast, there can't be a better pilot's watch than the one that you can actually read all the time. It's very important. Now, the idea of this for Peru, it means military pilots need clear readability. So we had one small change made to this model onto the central second hand, the tip of it. It had a round ball. Hence, collectors call it the lollipop. It has 98, but simply, technically speaking, because the first deliveries went to the Air Force of Peru. At the same time, the 2998 became, because it was a pilot's favorite, and because American Mercury astronauts, as probably most of us here know, they were military pilots, test pilots, and they needed watches, they needed cameras, they needed all kinds of things for the space program. And at the time, the company, the people that ran the program, their bosses, they didn't give them what they needed as far as regular consumables are concerned. So what did they do? They by now know 2 astronauts, and I think tonight we can even announce it might be a trinity, because there's a 3rd astronaut that we will not yet divulge the name, but there is a 3rd astronaut of the Mercury program that also chose privately a 2998. So if you ask me, or ask Omega, why the 2998, it's the watch that changed everything.
So this is really, it's a fascinating story, and it really kind of reflects a little bit the improvisational sort of bootstrap nature of early manned spaceflight. The race to get men into space was extremely competitive, and it was not as if you could go around and buy space stuff from people who had been making space stuff for 20 or 30 years. So you picked the right tool for the job, or as close as you could get from existing products that were out there. So we have this remarkable, really remarkable fact of a wristwatch that was obviously, nobody sat down with a blank sheet of paper and said, let's design a watch for manned spaceflight, but it turned out to be the best tool for the job.
It's true. And for us, it became really the first Omega in space as a private tool, as a private choice, which then literally woke up NASA to bigger things as far as watches are concerned and cameras, and led to the testing phase, but that's another story.
Yeah. Okay, fascinating. So the 2998 was produced in what numbers?
Oh, the numbers. Ooh. I wouldn't want to be quoted on this one because the numbers, the production numbers of the movements are still sometimes even for us at the museum, although we have all kinds of papers, they still hold some mysteries. We have come quite close to get a number, but I wouldn't be the one that wants to be quoted on that.
But again, even a certain degree of imprecision in this is, it's part of the nature of a watch being made to be used, being made as a tool, and not something that was originally conceived of as, you didn't keep track of every single reference number or serial number because there was no notion that that this would become, collectible.
I mean, we did actually, at Omega, we're very proud that we have an incredible array of archives, and nothing was destroyed. Although we lost a few things in things like fires and floods and things like that. And that's the problem. The problem is that, especially within our most legendary watch model, that we cannot always trace its history as far as production records are concerned, simply because we're missing pages. Literally, and we're missing pages on the 2915, we're missing pages on the 2998, and we're missing pages on the 10503, which is the tested one, which is the saddest thing to admit, but we have to be honest about this. Okay. Hence, I'm really not in the position to, we can estimate or guesstimate by the thousands, or by, in this case, by a couple of thousands. Sure. It wasn't a huge production, but it wasn't a limited edition.
Yep, of course. However, speaking of limited editions, you've handed me the segue to the next watch, which is, in a sense, we could almost call it the first Speedmaster limited edition, I think.
This is totally correct, and thank you for saying this, because now we talk about, it's the gold edition of the Moonwatch. It's the BA 145 022 or 022. And it has a very, very specific meaning to Omega, because we've skipped by now the NASA testing, we've skipped the moon landing, we've skipped everything because, I think we know about this. At least we should know about this. And we are after the success. And in order to commemorate and celebrate the success of the moon landing, we at Omega had a beautiful thought. And we conceived this model as literally our very first limited edition in brackets. Like not to handle it like this. So I need free hands to do this. And we conceived the idea that all the active members of the astronaut corps of NASA at the time, and all the future astronauts that have not yet flown but were selected, as well as the President of the United States and his Vice President, as well as certain heads, top management at NASA, would receive this watch as a gift of appreciation for everything that was done, basically for the advancement of humanity, of humankind. And during a gala dinner in Houston at the Warwick Hotel in November '69, all the active astronauts received an invitation, NASA personnel received an invitation, and yes, once again, the White House received an invitation. The problem is we produced these pieces, we engraved these pieces with the respective names, and what we are having, I'm touching it again, what we're having here, and I hope we can shoot some close-ups later, on the case back, we have the engraving of the name of the Vice President of the United States, Spiro T. Agnew at the time. But because the President in a friendly manner, declined because they were not supposed to receive expensive gifts.
Sure.
The Vice President also declined. The astronauts were, in parts, I have to say, because they're state employees. So it's not an evident thing that an astronaut would accept such a gift.
Sure.
And a few of them also did not feel very safe at saying yes. Later on, they sent us letters, and we fulfilled the promise. So Omega said that every active astronaut of the Apollo program and the Gemini program will receive his watch, and this is exactly what we did in the end, because this dragged on until 1972.
Ooh, so there was of course the excuse me, the president and vice president politely declined to receive the watches for obvious reasons. And several of the astronauts did initially, but they were sort of persuaded to accept the...
I wouldn't say persuaded, certainly not from us.
Yeah.
I think every astronaut that, for example, didn't receive it because they hadn't yet flown yet, for example. I mean, the moment you have... imagine you're an astronaut and the Speedmaster is probably the single most close to normality object that you have up there, you have on the moon, you have with you that reminds you of everything that's important. It reminds you of home, it reminds you of your home time, it reminds you of your family. So every single astronaut that flew later, personally, I would incline to believe that, yeah, it's normal that they would all want to receive this commemorative edition because they flew with this watch, they flew with the Speedmaster.
So to take it before actually flying would have been, so to speak, bad luck.
Because a lot of astronauts actually believed in luck. They have mascots and lucky charms and things like that. So it might have been a bad luck, or they might not yet have come to to appreciate what this watch might mean to them in the future.
So and it's quite interesting. So these watches were actually produced and engraved before it was clear whether or not the recipients would be able to actually accept them.
That's correct. And originally 28 pieces with specific engravements, and altogether of this edition we made 1,014 pieces, and the rest, I would say, that did not go to the astronauts or to NASA officials, was sold to the public with a beautiful case back, and it's a wonderful play of colors that you have with this, with a burgundy bezel replacing the black anodized aluminum. It's a beautiful Speedmaster.
So just these two watches really together, the 2998 and the gold, the Gold Spiro Agnew, they actually represent sort of two poles of the presence of the Speedmaster. On the one hand, we have the 2998, which represents the astronauts selecting for themselves the right tool for the job, the best tool for the job, at the very, very early days. And then we have the Gold Spiro Agnew, which is one of the watches that represents the triumph of the space program, and sort of a high. It's a commemoration, you could say, of a real high point in manned spaceflight, which we struggle to return to.
Yeah, absolutely true. And on a personal note, I can say that really I hope that we will get back there, because that's exactly what we need. The whole planet needs it.
Yeah. So the third watch, speaking of going back, was actually designed to fulfill a particular role in manned spaceflight. And there was some concern, I think, based on the conversation you and I had earlier today, about whether or not the Speedmaster Professional itself could actually, stand up to more prolonged use in outer space.
Yeah, I mean, concern is probably a very, very, very strong word, but indeed, the engineer corps, led by James Ragan,
Not concerned so much, but you want to be sure.
Yeah, of course, evidently. NASA wants to be sure, and evidently also we, because by that time, it was known to the world that the Speedmaster is flying in space. And the thing is, the original Speedmaster tests were carried out with a goal to achieve spaceflight and with a goal to achieve EVA, like regular, normal spacewalk activity. But NASA by 1968 knew already that Apollo 15 is coming. They knew that the lunar rover is coming, and they knew that the EVAs on the moon will be longer and will be a bit more hard for a lot of equipment. And so NASA needed to ascertain themselves that also the watches would survive. To fulfill that end, there was no deal, of course, but to fulfill that, today we can say secretly, we tried to develop, to better even on the Speedmaster, to create the perfect space watch. And the result, the first result, was a watch that is today known as Alaska Project. Here we talk about what we know as Alaska Project 1 or Alaska 1. And just to clarify once and for all that the name Alaska has nothing to do with temperatures, has nothing to do with snow. At the time, Omega did code name its secret projects with two different ways. We code named movement projects with birds. Bird names. Famously, I think collectors amongst us today will know the albatross, the chronoquartz. And it's called albatross because, simply speaking, the movement, when it was developed secretly, it was the Project Albatross. And for full watches, we used at the time country names, city names, or state names. It could well have been the Project New York, or Project Paris, or Project anything else. It just happened to be Project Alaska. And the idea was, at the time, Bienne was, still is, but was already watchmaking capital of the world. And the competition was there, American competition.
So there were American companies, American companies that had presence in Bienne, and there was some concern about inadvertent technology transfer, should we say?
Yes, this you can say even louder than this.
Yeah.
And so the idea was, if we can confuse the possible leakers with false information, this is exactly what happened. It even confused us at some point. So what you have with the Alaska One is an incredible advancement in technology, because you have something that showcases Omega's pioneering spirit that was always present and is present until today, and you'll find some parallels. Now, Spacewatch rule number 1, if you like, protect the movement. How do you protect the movement? You protect it, you make it so that it protects itself. So the Caliber 861 inside this version of the Alaska project has all its vertical parts, all the pivots, made of a special alloy to make them more temperature resistant, and it also used a new generation of oils to change the viscosity. Okay, so you protect the movement by protecting it itself. And vertical parts, this should ring a bell when you talk about today's Omega technology. It's a precursor of things to come. Second rule, protect the movement with a watch case. If you look at the shape of the Alaska One case, it's a cushion shape, it's quite huge. It's asymmetric as the Moonwatch case, but quite thick, and it's made of titanium. And this watch qualifies as one of the first, if not the first, chronographs of the whole world to be made in titanium. In 1968 and 69, because that's the timing of this watch, titanium, this is not your regular material. Yeah. And we had to learn how to work it actually to make a watch case like this. And then rule number 3, protect the dial, protect it from upstairs, like from the upper side. The white color was chosen after many, many tests in Zurich in a so-called space simulator, because it's the color that was found that reflects heat and radiation better than instead of absorbing it. And the last and final protection is the one that most collectors know today, the outer case. Aluminum, red anodized aluminum.
I think once you see this, you never forget it.
Yes.
It's really amazing.
And as a collector, it gave me a nightmare, of course, in my younger days, because I always wanted one. At least now I can touch it.
So it sounds like the main concern with developing the Alaska, it's a fascinating story, by the way, about the naming conventions for movement development projects and for watch development projects. It sounds like the main concern for the Alaska project was really greater resistance to extreme temperature variations due to prolonged exposure during the longer EVAs that would be associated with the later Apollo mission.
Especially also on the lunar rover.
On the lunar rover.
Because if you take into account the extreme solar exposure, which is unfiltered for an EVA that goes for longer than 30 minutes, and the astronaut that is not driving the rover, which is holding on the rail like this, I mean, even though we talk about slow motion in brackets, still, with the heat and everything else, the watch has to endure incredible things. Yeah. And mind you, I mean, even the Speedmaster, like the regular Speedmaster in the end endured it, because this one didn't make it in the end to the moon. So everything that NASA was possibly a bit afraid didn't happen. Because in the end of the day, those long spacewalks, those long EVAs were carried out with regular production Speedmasters. And that says a lot.
So, just to sort of sum up, we have the 2998, which, again represents those, brave early days when you got the job done however you possibly could get it done with the best tool you could find. We have the gold Sparrow Agnew, which sort of represents the high watermark of man's spaceflight, the achievement of the moon, the ability to send human astronauts into low Earth orbit, more or less at will. And then we have the Alaska project, this wonderful piece of engineering that represents a sort of extreme development of the mechanical watch in particular, or in general, and the Speedmaster in particular, for the most grueling possible environments that it could be placed in, kind of a dream of a possible future for manned spaceflight.
And it links also to the world of today, watchmaking today, and even the watchmaking of the future for us. So it's really an important watch because it's not the missing link, the link is there.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't there, it would have been the missing link.
Well, that's three great stories, Petros. Thank you so much for bringing these watches in for us today to talk about, and for us to find out some new things about their history. There are a million Speedmaster stories, and each one is better than the next, but thank you for sharing these three.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All the best.
Ben's ugly face up here, but unfortunately, here I am again, and for those of you all online, again. So I want to thank these two guys for talking about a little bit of the history of Omega. Petros is somebody I've known for quite some time. He is truly a marvel of horological knowledge. Obviously, so is our own Jack Forrester. So it's a great little duo there. And so now we have somebody that focuses on a little bit of the history of Omega, but more about the present and the future of Omega. So Reynald here is, in fact, the president and CEO of Omega Worldwide. So I'm going to ask a question that I think actually many people would love to know. How does one get to be the president of Omega?
Thank you for asking me this question. I think that for many people knowing me, and I've been called when I was elected as a veteran of Omega because I've spent 20 years of my career. In fact, my whole career just after writing the PhD with Omega. So it's all about sharing what we could hear also from Petros. It's all sharing about the passion about that incredible brand, and just to talk about Speedmaster. I think that we have to come back also to some of the bad times, maybe about the idea of one of the gentlemen that was long time before me that once in the management committee decided to really stop the production of this only reference, which was the Speedmaster Moonwatch. And that was at that time, with the passion and with the vision of Mr. Hayek, totally, of course, not accepted by himself. So you see, this whole Omega, it's a magical brand, Speedmaster even more so. So 20 years of Omega, very much into sales and distribution, having contributed, like many of my colleagues worldwide, about the success of who we are today, and then being there at the right time, and also sharing maybe some of the ideas for the future, about how to bring this incredible traditional brand, how to bring the magic into even more success. And I'm very proud of being the CEO of this company, because I'm very proud of all the people that are working for me and for that brand all around the world. We share the same passion.
And were you aware of Omega as a child growing up?
Yeah, I mean, what is very interesting is that now hearing about some of the stories that obviously know, because we've been spending a lot of time together with Petros. Obviously, I mean, I've always been a very big fan of chronograph, and Speedmaster always been one of the watch that I was always looking at up, because it's if it's not the most iconic chronograph, it's at least the most iconic watch chronograph for me.
And it's funny, you've told me in the past that while collectors tend to gravitate towards Speedmaster, commercially the Seamaster and other lines are maybe even more successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's also historically, as I've said, because Speedmaster was not longer than about 25 years ago, only one reference, and in the meantime, it's become so strong, but it represents more this whole tradition. Without tradition, without the DNA of a collection, you can't do any success. I'm truly very much believer in that, and Speedmaster is for me the most iconic example of the success of Omega today. Because of this, there's not one Speedmaster in our collection, even though we have many references, that is not a chronograph. I mean, this whole structure that we've been put in place for Speedmaster makes it into a big success. But of course, if I think about some of the marketing and communication successes of Omega, I have to talk about, the Olympic Games, the testimonial, but obviously about James Bond and the whole Seamaster line, which also represent the tradition and the innovation spirit. Petros talked about the pioneering spirit of Omega. I think if you think about the 20s, 30s, or later on, Seamaster always also been one of the most symbolic watch of our brand that represented, this whole diving, the whole technology about professional watches. So obviously, Seamaster with the lines we have, with the celebration we have this year, again, also 60 years, is basically also part of the DNA of the brand. And in the meantime, because of the James Bond campaign, because of the Planet Ocean structure, has become a bigger line than Speedmaster, yes.
And so when you're deciding where to distribute budget, how do you say, okay, Speedmaster is for collectors and connoisseurs, and we've got these other lines that are really commercially driven. You have the Olympics, you have James Bond, you have so Michael Phelps, Sidney Crawford, amazing ambassadors. How do you decide what gets what, or which budget is allocated to where?
First of all, there's one thing that is very important, and I see it even more today, and I've always been very much in my career as a sales and retail guy. We are not a mono-product brand. Right. The magic about Omega is about having different lines. It's probably one of the most attractive brand in terms of a DNA in each of the lines. So, of course, we are also looking at the years. If it's an Olympic year, if there is a history about a line, then we are allocating the goods. But somewhere we are very passionate about all this, so that the year finally is very long, and we are organizing ourselves in terms of renovating, rejuvenating some brands, bringing into, as for instance, the new Aquaterra coming to Basel with the whole master chronometer certification that we're going to bring into that line. But we're never, ever leaving one of our children alone for the whole year. So it's very much about passion. It's very much about also topic. And as we were discussing before, there's, for instance, one incredible, heritage from the past almost now is the famous limited edition. And this year, of course, it's again a limited edition of Speedmaster. That is for us a very key element of our strategy, but it's maybe not always linked with a lot of advertising, but a lot of passion about people and making events like tonight with collectors talking about maybe already the next ones, as this one of this year is already finished and quite of an attractive one, I have to admit. Also to the fact that it's a tribute to Jinsun, who was is not only the last man who was on the moon, but who was a tremendous ambassador, not only from Omega, but an ambassador of this whole incredible time of pioneering of the whole moon expedition. So I have to say it's also something that anyway we would have done, because we have lost a true friend.
Yeah, and I think a watch that was really exciting to so many of us was the Speedy Tuesday limited edition that you did with our friend Robert Jan not so long ago. How did that project come to be?
As I said, we have an iconic piece, which is Speedmaster, but we have also the tradition. We have also, don't forget, this whole new world. At Omega, we're quite a dynamic in terms of digital. Everybody talks a lot about digital and all that, but I think that there's a way of, first of all, of knowing, of being coherent and consistent, and getting to understand what are also the needs and what are the expectation. So the Speedy Tuesday for us was like the perfect example of how to create the real watch, how to celebrate Speedmaster in its own DNA. Because Speedy Tuesday, for me, every Tuesday, this is a celebration of one watch, an iconic watch. Somehow, even further than the whole moon expeditions, it's about the design, it's about some people that have this love, this passion, or that we like at Omega, that brought us some success. So, Speedy Tuesday, we had them creating an event like today in our offices, and then speaking to Robert Jan and to some of the people there that have so much of respect and love for that brand, we decided to create this in the way of Omega doing things. with a perfect product, and I have to admit also the perfect way of talking to collectors and fans worldwide. And I'm very thrilled about the result, and I'm somewhere, very proud of this brand that is Speedmaster, because PD Tuesday, the watch, is for me the real example of the celebration of all this passion that people have for that iconic model. Yeah. And this not only because it's an old vintage watch, because it's a very modern watch. This is the example that at Omega, we not only talk about the past, we are realizing it into the present with a lot of emotion, which it's very rare for a brand. Yeah. Speedmaster is not only a watch that you can buy as a vintage. It has a lot of modernity, and will continue to do so.
I would say if there's one criticism I occasionally hear from collectors, journalists, friends of the Speedmasters, that there are so many limited editions. What will you continue to do over the next few years, and how do you kind of juxtapose your strategy versus another brand strategy who also makes a nice chronograph, and there's only one model, and there's only been one model for the last 50 years or so.
Let me tell you that there is still the Speedmaster. We all know it, and you can still have these iconic ones. There's a lot of inspiration around the limited edition that we're doing every year. The inspiration is about the watch that you get in a fantastic box with the whole story about the moon. And this is something that still today is the best seller of the line. So this is also very important for me to mention that watch, the Speedmaster, is one of the most, not iconic, but most inspiring watches. Now to talk about the limited edition, I think that it's our tribute, our heritage to that famous model and to the whole expeditions, from all the Apollos and Gemini. I think it's part of our DNA to celebrate each year with a special model. That exactly contribution that Omega has done to this still today incredible moon history. So from my understanding, I think that there's a lot of people that are interested by the limited edition that finally will buy the iconic watch, and there is also a lot of success always around the limited edition, because they're not just there with a small engraving on the back. There's always a story about it. There's always something that of course relates to the mission, but still also make it a bit different. If I think about the very famous Snoopy, that's not only a limited edition, that's much more than this. Right. But don't forget, that's talking about inspiration for some young people that don't know about this whole history, and are suddenly being interested into our chronograph or even into watches, which for me, it's more than just talking about a limited edition.
Great. I think that kind of wraps things up for us here. I'd like to invite everybody to come upstairs, where you will see a few surprises. I'll give you a little hint. So we're going to see quite a few vintage pieces, thanks to Petros here. I think about 10 or so. 10? Yeah. So we've got some vintage pieces from the museum, and you will also, as Jack alluded to, see some things that nobody else in the world has seen yet, and that includes the Basel novelties for this year. So you will be the first to see that, which is pretty exciting. And on top of that,
thank you.
The one thing I have to stress is truly no photos of this. There might be a scary guy up there that will break your arm if you do take a photo of it. It might be him, by the way. So no photos, but please respect that and enjoy. We'll see you upstairs.
I have just one last thing, and as you know, we're always very happy and as I said many times, the passion that we have about Speedmaster. I'm very happy you're all here, and I hope you're gonna enjoy the whole evening. So because we've also very thankful that you all came here and discover and participate and somewhere create the next stories probably about these watches. We prepared a small gift for you, which is an Hodinkee, obviously, and Omega